This is Chapter 9, Management of Quality, Operations Management. So this is the dimensions of quality. There's performance, which is sort of the main characteristics of the product. The next is aesthetics, so the appearance, feel, smell, taste. You might think of it as form and function. So the first one is function, the second is really the form. The next is special features, the extra characteristics. Conformance. So that's, how well does this product conform to design specifications? And we have reliability, and that's the consistency of the performance. The next is durability, which you can think of as the life of the product. The next is perceived quality. So this is that indirect evaluation of the quality. Serviceability, handling of complaints and also handling of repairs. And then consistency. So this is how the quality, it's the same from time to time. Okay, so the previous was sort of a product. This is the dimensions of service quality. So the difference between goods and services. So this is dimensions of service quality. So convenience, availability and accessibility of the service, reliability. So this is, it's dependable, consistent, accurate. Responsiveness, this is the willingness to help customers in unusual situations or deal with problems. The time, how fast you get the service. Assurance, and this is where you trust the person given the service, or you convey trust and confidence. Courtesy, the way the customers are treated by employees. There's the tangible, the physical appearance of the facilities, equipment, personnel, communication materials. Consistency, that's the ability to provide the same level of good quality. And then expectancy. Did it meet or exceed the customer's expectations, or did it somehow fall below what was expected? So who's responsible for quality? So the first thing is top management. The next is design. So you design in quality. Procurement, you're buying quality, either parts or sub-assemblies. Production and operations, if you're building it, whoever's responsible for that is responsible for quality. A lot of times there's a quality assurance person or department. Packing and shipping. So a lot of times you see a little label in your thing, packed by, shipped. You can also have inspected by, which is the quality assurance person. Marketing and sales. So the way marketing and sales are involved in quality is they are setting expectations of the customer. They're also giving back to everybody else what the customers are wanting as far as quality. Then customer service. So their role in quality is they're handling the complaints. So they're able to provide the feedback of the data of what people are complaining about, or helping them if it didn't meet the quality expectations. And then the bottom line is everyone in the organization has some responsibility for quality. Some people, it's a key responsibility. Others, it's more a collateral duty. So the cost of quality. So there's appraisal costs. So this is activities designed to ensure quality or uncover defects. So these are your quality inspectors, the people who are saying, does this meet the quality or not? Then there's the prevention cost. So all the total quality training, total quality management, customer assessment, process control, quality improvement, cost to prevent defects from occurring. And then the failure cost. So when someone does not, when something or someone does not meet the quality plan, those are the failure costs. So there's internal failure costs. So a product was almost ready, or some point along the way you discovered that product did not meet the quality. So now you have to pull that out and you have to fix it, or that could be considered scrap if you have to throw it away, or you have to fix it. Those are internal failure costs. And then there's external failure costs. You had this filter, it went to a customer. Now you have a failure cost, and now it's shipped back. So I bought this tent, a Coleman tent for Pathfinders, and I think it was like a $200 tent. And the first time we put it up, what we noticed is they had actually assembled one of the poles wrong, so it was stuck. And so I called customer service, and I just wanted a pole replaced, but they didn't have the process to replace the pole. What they had was they had me write the return authorization number on the tent, their number, and then they had me take pictures of the tent, take pictures of the problem, and give them the pictures. And then they sent me an entire new tent, but they said I could keep the old tent, the tent that was bad. Well, that was a failure cost. What I ended up doing was actually fixing the pole that was broken, and so we actually ended up with an extra tent. That extra tent had, over the logo, had in permanent ink the return number, but we ended up with an extra tent. But that's an example of an external failure cost of quality. They had to, even though it was just one little part that was bad, they gave me a new tent. Quality awards. So if you get into quality, you'll start hearing about these. One of them's a Deming Prize, another one's the Baldrige Award, and then there's this European Foundation for Quality Model, EFQM, Excellence Award. So there's some international certifications, and you might hear this. A company is ISO 9000 certified, and so this is a set of international standards on quality management and quality assurance. ISO 14000, this is a set of international standards for assessing a company's environmental performance. And then ISO 24700, and this is the quality of office equipment that contains reused parts. So this is the TQM approach. So when I was 30 years ago, back when I was an engineer, we were doing TQM, and it's a total quality management. It's an approach, and it's sort of the grandfather of quality management. And we'll go through some of the newer ways, but they all share very similar characteristics. So number one, you find out what the customer wants. The second is you design a product or service that meets or exceeds customer wants. you design processes that facilitate doing the job right the first time. Then you keep track of the results. Then you extend these concepts throughout the supply chain. So you start with yourself, and then you start working backwards. So your suppliers and your suppliers' suppliers, and you work forward to your the people who are delivering it throughout the entire supply chain. And then the critical thing is top management must be involved and committed. So this takes a lot of work, and top management can undo it with just a couple of decisions where it's like as soon as quality is not important, it just goes out the door. So here's some TQM elements. One of them is continuous improvement. Second is competitive benchmarking. Third is employee empowerment. Then team approach. Decision based on fact, not opinion. You have knowledge tools, supplier quality. You have a champion, quality at the source, and suppliers are partners in the process. So this is the next one, which is continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is a philosophy that seeks to make never-ending improvements in the process of converting inputs to outputs. So it's that philosophy where we're going to improve this, and then we're going to improve it again, and then we're going to improve it again. You never stop improving. It's not like, well, we already improved it, so that's enough. No, you continue to improve it. Another thing is something called Kaizen, and in Lean Six Sigma it's become actually a method, but a Kaizen is simply the Japanese word for continuous improvement. So this is the PDSA. Now if you plan, do, study, act. In management, other management disciplines, you see a similar acronym that's actually plan, do, check, act. But it's the same concept. So you start out by planning. You begin studying your current process. You collect data, analyze the data, specify the measures for the plan. So this is the planning piece. Then you do. So you implement the plan. You document the changes. You collect data for analysis. Then you study. This is where management uses this cycle and calls it check, plan, do, check, act. But study. You evaluate the data collection during the do phase. You check the results against your plan goals. And then act is the results. If the results are successful, you standardize the new method and communicate it to relevant personnel. You implement training for the new method. If unsuccessful, you revise the plan and repeat the process. So you can see up there at the right, it's sort of really a circle where you're going around. Plan, do, study, act. Plan, do, study, act. Management, it would be plan, do, check, act. But it's that continuous process. Process improvement is a systematic approach to improving processes. So here's the steps. You map the process. You collect information about the existing process, identify each step in the process. You prepare a flowchart that accurately depicts the process. Then you analyze the process. You ask yourself critical questions about the process. You ask specific questions about each step in the process. And then you redesign the process. How do you make this better? Now, one of the pitfalls that I've seen with this is people skip the first step, and as they're trying to document the process, they redesign it. So it's very important to actually document what you're actually doing. And sometimes if you're not a process-driven organization, if you have 4 people doing the same job, 4 of them are doing it 4 different ways. So that's where you might want to go ahead and map all four of those ways, um, because by mapping that, you may be able to redesign the process simply by taking parts of those four people's process and blending them together into a process that's really more effective. Six Sigma. So this is a term that you'll hear recently. Um, Six Sigma is simply 3.4 defects per million. So if you look at standard deviation 1 sigma, 2 sigma, 3 sigma, if you look at a normal curve, 6 sigma is that little piece way out at the edge. And so the goal of 6 sigma is to reduce variation. It's data driven. It requires data validations. The outputs are determined by the inputs. And the bottom line is only a few inputs have a significant impact on the outputs. And then there's something that's called DMAIC. And if you're in this world, DMAIC becomes a word. DMAIC, the DMAIC process, DMAIC. But it stands for define, measure, analyze, control, improve control. It's really sort of that plan, do, study, act. It's those same steps. It's just that define is the plan, do is the measure, and analyze. Well, check is analyze, and then improved is the act, improve control. So it's very similar. You can lay them side by side. So that's the make, and it's good to know what that means. 7 quality tools. So through all of these processes, when you're doing quality control, you tend to use these tools over and over and over. So this just sort of lists them, but flowchart is the first one. And you start out over here, and I'll just sort of go through these. This is an activity, and then a decision, some kind of an activity, a decision. You go here, and that's sort of a simple flow chart. There's variations of flow charts. There's different tools you can use, but it's a way of documenting how things work. A check sheet. So a check sheet. It's one of those tongue twisters for me. A check sheet is a tool for organizing and collecting data. So it's sort of like a tally. So you look over here, you have defect 1, defect 2, defect 3, and you just do this tally. It's like, well, on day 1 we had these, on day 2 we had these, day 3 we had these, day 4. And so a check sheet is sort of like, okay, well, we don't know how often this occurs, so let's give whoever's in the process a check sheet, and we'll measure them. Once you have that raw data from the check sheet, you can do a couple of things with it. One is a histogram. So you look here, and here you take this data. So here's defect A, and you add all of this up. Defect B, defect C, defect E, and you can create this histogram of how often do these defects happen. Now, the next thing is a Pareto chart. And this is the Pareto chart. And what this is you simply sort the defects. Now, I don't know if you remember, early on we talked about the 80-20 rule. The Pareto effect. This is where 80% of your problems come from 20% of the sources. So the best way to find that 20% is to do this Pareto chart. So your Pareto problems, so what you do is the first thing, C is the most prevalent problem. So the first thing you do is say, how do we solve C? And then, or you might do, how do we solve B and C? Or what you can do is you can just start here and you go a ways, and once you get to here, you may be done. Then there's a scatter diagram, and this just shows the relationship between two variables. And sometimes it shows a nice line like this, so you have a linear relationship. Sometimes it's just dots. And then if you do a scatter plot, you know that this is just dots and it doesn't mean anything. The next thing is a control chart. And we are going to get into control charts in the next chapter in more detail. But the idea here is this is what you want. This is your upper control limit and your lower control limit. And any dot that is inside here is okay. If a dot's outside, that means it's outside your control limit. And then the next is a cause and effect chart. And this is also known as a fishbone chart. But you have this problem, and then you have different causes, and then there's sub causes, and what you end up doing is creating this chart that looks like a fishbone by having causes, sub causes, sub causes. That's it's an interesting way of showing cause and effect. So methods for generating ideas. So the first is something called brainstorming. And most of us have experienced brainstorming in one method or another. The traditional brainstorming is you say, okay, let's brainstorm. You throw out a bunch of ideas really fast, and the two ground rules are there's no bad ideas and there's no crazy ideas are okay. The nice thing about this is what happens is when you do this as a group, it can bounce off of each other. So one person will throw out a crazy idea, and that will trigger an idea that is not so crazy, but no one would have thought of it except for that crazy idea. And you don't want to say, and there's no bad ideas. The reason for no bad ideas is as soon as someone says, that's a stupid idea, or I don't like that, that shuts down the brainstorming. If you allow no crazy ideas, and you allow people to say that's a bad idea, instead of a brainstorm, you get what I call a brain drizzle. You don't get near as many ideas, and you may not find that good idea. A variation of brainstorming is something called silent brainstorming. And what this is, everybody makes their own list of all the possible ideas, and then you go around the room, and each person shares their one idea off their list. And then as you're going around the room, what'll happen is other people will share the same ideas, and if someone else shares your ideas, you just cross it off. The benefit of this is really good if you have a mixture of what I would call shy, silent people and boisterous, loud people. So if you use traditional brainstorming with boisterous, with that mix, what'll happen is you'll only get the loud ideas, and the silent people will never ever say anything because they're too shy or too bashful or too polite to ever get their idea on the list, and the brainstorm is over and they haven't said anything, and they may have that critical idea. So this is a really good way of pulling those other ideas out. Another good thing is sometimes if the boss or the boss's boss is in the room, people will be afraid to share in a traditional brainstorming. But if you do the silent brainstorming, then everybody is throwing out an idea, and it's sort of an orderly brainstorming. So another one is this yellow post-its. And so you give everybody a stack of yellow post-its. And so as people think of ideas, they just stick it up on the board where everybody can see. So you sort of gather around the wall, and you start sticking ideas up. And the cool thing with this is it's sort of this it's almost like a compromise between that silent brainstorming and the traditional brainstorming, because everybody sees the ideas and it's sparking ideas. But then the other cool thing with this is once you have all those ideas up there, you can start just moving the yellow stickies around and put them into categories. So you put all of the one ideas in one, different ideas, and it's a cool way. Quality circles. So the quality circle is a group of workers who meet to discuss ways of improving products or processes. It's less structured and less formal than teams involved in continuous improvement. And quality circles have historically had less authority to make only, they have relatively little authority, and it's really only the minor changes. But a quality circle is where the boss says, hey, let's have a quality circle, and everybody sort of gathers and comes up with a few ideas and implements it. A quality circle was sort of the early days of TQM. The next is benchmarking. So benchmarking is where you identify critical process that needs improvement. You identify an organization that excels in this process. You contact that organization, analyze the data, improve the process. So you figure out who is good at this. You find an organization. You may or may not, if they are a direct competitor, you may not be able to, they may not give you access to data. But if they're sort of, someone who does similar things, they may be happy to share how they do it. So sometimes you have to do the benchmarking subtly. Sometimes you can do it blatantly, contact the organization. Sometimes people in your supply chain could be sharing ideas. So it's like, we want to improve this. One of our suppliers is good at that. So you go contact the supplier, find out how they're doing it, and then you can apply those in your own organization. So your operations strategy. So quality is a strategic imperative for organizations. Customers are very concerned with the quality of goods and services received. Quality is a never-ending journey. It's important that organizational members understand and buy this idea. Customer satisfaction does not equal customer loyalty. So there was an interesting study with a bank, and they looked at customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. And what they found was their most loyal customers were customers who had a significant problem, but then the bank solved the problem sufficiently to the customer's needs, and they were actually more loyal to the bank than the customer who had always been satisfied. So that it's sort of interesting, but it shows the importance of customer service, especially when you're dealing with quality and taking care of the customer. So quality needs to be incorporated throughout the entire supply chain, not just the organization itself.